So my name is Ben Solomon, and I'm the founder and managing partner of FedTech. And for those of you that I see some familiar faces, but if you're new to FedTech, we are a venture firm, offices in Washington, D.C., Austin, Texas, that and we work at the intersection of usually government-funded R&D and entrepreneurship. We start and grow a lot of companies, often in partnership with government organizations like Scott works for. And we are just thrilled to have an amazing session planned here today. So we're joined with by Scott Agenbaugh and Patricia Grossbaron from Jumpstart. And this is a very special webinar for me, at least, in that this is Scott and I are both from Cleveland originally. We now live in the DC area, but grew up in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, and still, follow all the Cleveland sports teams, love Cleveland to death. And Scott and I actually grew up a few streets away from each other without knowing it back then. And Patricia has been a longtime Clevelander now, although you'll see that she comes from France originally. So just a general agenda for today. So we're going to have some informal discussion among the three of us, and about 30 minutes in or so, we'll break to really the most important part of the session, which is questions from all of you. So what we'll do is ask you to please put your questions into the chat, and our team will moderate and we'll read off as many of them as we can from the guests here. So we're going to cover some great themes here today. So we're going to talk about how government funding can really be a primary catalyst for your venture. We're going to talk about how Ohio ventures in particular can compete in this very unique space. And then I think we're just going to explore really what's an amazing period in our history where it's never been easier for startups to work with government in a meaningful way. And I think that's awfully exciting for all of us. So let's jump in with some intros. Scott, if you don't mind just sharing what you do at Ensign, a little bit about Ensign would also be great. And then we'll move over to you, Patricia.
So I did spend some time in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, but I was originally from Aurora, Ohio, if you know where that was. We used to have SeaWorld and Six Flags and a bunch of other things, but those unfortunately closed down. So that's the area of, I guess, Cleveland that I'm from. But again, grew up there, spent a lot of my time there. I actually still refer to myself as an Ohioan, even though I've been out in Virginia now since 2005. So it's certainly part of, I'm just excited to be here because it's a great way for me to potentially connect back with my home state. So Ensign as a program office, we're underneath the Defense Department. For those of you that do or don't understand how the Defense Department is structured, there's a bunch of different lines of effort essentially in the department at the Office of the Secretary of Defense level, and then the services. Ensign falls squarely underneath OSD, Office of Secretary of Defense, underneath the Undersecretary for Research and Engineering, Heidi Schuh's portfolio of things. And then Ensign works with an organization called DIU, which may be familiar to you, that does a number of other unique projects, and we can get into that. So Ensign, DIU, and another group called NSIC sort of form a core underneath research and engineering. Ensign's been around. We previously were MD5. In fact, I worked quite extensively with Ben in those early days of when we were MD5 back in 2017, and have been partnering with FedTech for a long time on programming. So it's a great opportunity to talk about how we've been working together as well. But broadly speaking, Ensign as a program office is trying to work with entrepreneurs, other non-traditional sources of innovation to take those ideas and teams and convey them in other ways as defense solutions to the defense market. So we have three lines of effort. One of the lines is focused on national service. So we have programming where we try to encourage those that might be in the audience that are thinking about working with the government, giving them opportunities, even sometimes short-term, essentially internships, paid internships, to work directly with mission partners. And that all falls underneath the national service portfolio. It's a great set of opportunities if you're looking to engage, and even in that sort of short-term context, that's a place to maybe plug in. The second is in a collaboration portfolio. So we do things like hackathons that you might be familiar with. There's a program called Hacking for Defense, which is taught at universities across the United States. And so oftentimes those are really collisions between those groups of entrepreneurs and some problem sets that we've given to them. And that's across the country. So if you're, depending on where you are, even if you're not in Ohio, there's other ways in which you can plug in, but it's taught at Ohio State University, which is obviously in your backyard. So there, if you're looking for those types of events, we have them recurring all the time. The courses are recurring pretty much every semester now. So lots of other ways to plug in if your alma mater is somewhere else. And then finally, we have an acceleration portfolio, which is focused on really some of that tech transfer work. So academic tech transfer, DoD tech transfer, which is one of the ways in which we interface with FedTech, working with the national labs, the AFRLs, FFRDCs, federally funded research and development centers, to take technologies and potentially both spin them out into commercial products, but then also potentially transition them or spin them in back to the Defense Department to solve a defense need. A lot we can talk about there, but again, that's really part of the Excel portfolio, which is really engaged with early stage ventures up through, let's say, Series B. So unfortunately, my job is now to take all of those things and figure out how do we get them to the defense market. So I'm spending a lot of my time working on hardcore acquisition issues, trying to figure out how do I get them on contracts, how do I get them to their next customer for a discovery interview, and so trying to create that connective tissue in what we call the transition cell at Ensign. So again, there'll be an opportunity to talk more about that as well, but that's sort of the role I play, as well as I'm the strategic engagement director at Ensign. So I focus a lot of my time and attention on larger mission partners that might have diverse sets of problems that span across the regions. Last plug I got to put in is there's a giant team at Ensign. So even though you're seeing me today, there's a bunch of awesome people. We've got program managers in all of those portfolios. We have what we call the regional network team, which spans across the United States. We have one individual at Ohio State University who is our university program director, Ian. So certainly there's a local connection point if you're looking for somebody in the state of Ohio. And that model that we have is sort of akin to the FEMA model of we break the US into 11 different regions. So we have pretty broad scope in terms of where we can connect mission partners in across the United States. So all in all, we have almost 70 people at Ensign at any given moment, which is a lot of great talent. And I would be amiss without talking about them a little bit more and the great roles they play in helping us achieve this mission.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. Yeah. So think back to about 10 years ago when I started as a young entrepreneur kind of in this space of working with government. And what I remember was just how hard, government felt like a big monolith. It was very exciting and to get to talk to someone in government, and it felt like, very separated from the actual customer. What's been amazing to see in organizations like yours is just how much there is kind of a grassroots and ability for innovators to connect in at a much earlier, less formal level than ever before. So wonderful work. Ensign has grown a ton, and thanks to good leadership from folks like yourself. And so wonderful. Great. Thank you. And Patricia, if you don't mind just sharing kind of your story, a little bit about Jumpstart and the work you do in Ohio.
Sure. I'll start. Thanks, Ben. I'll start with Jumpstart first and then explain a little bit about my role and my background. So Jumpstart provides capital, services, and connections to help entrepreneurs grow, researchers commercialize, and corporations innovate. And those three things actually are very, do resonate with the topic at hand today. Today, we actually have announced, if you are checking out some of the local news, the launch of Jumpstart Ventures. We have about $140 million under investment, looking at deploying $70 million. I am on the services side. I manage the technical assistance to tech startups with a couple of ecosystems that are in Northern Ohio, so Northeast Ohio and Northwest Ohio. And we have incubators, accelerators, subject matter experts who are helping tech startups, researchers at universities figure out how they can make some progress, get some traction, do some customer validation and whatnot. My background, so as you can tell, it's not an Ohio accent. I'm from France, came here about 29 years ago, This is home now. Been working with Ohio Aerospace Institute before joining Jumpstart. So the Department of Defense activities, they're just near and dear to my heart just by the sheer nature of the background and experience that I had before. Had a chance to join Jumpstart and spend more time helping the startups connect with some of those opportunities. My program is partially funded by the state of Ohio under the Ohio Third Frontier program, and we actually have sister entities across the state that are running those programs. And it's important to note that in Ohio, you have the Air Force Research Lab in Dayton, and you have NASA Glenn Research Center up here in Cleveland. And those are providing great opportunities for companies to connect into some pretty neat technology development and commercialization projects. A couple of years ago, I think it was before COVID, and then COVID happened, so we had the demo day virtually. I got to meet Ben and Ish with their FedTech Accelerator program that they brought here. And we're very happy to see some of the companies continuing to get traction. One to be mentioned is Smart Tire that has relocated here in the region in order to take advantage of the great industry assets that we have here. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell here.
Thank you, Patricia. Yeah, and we've been so impressed with the work that Jumpstart does. We get to see really venture organizations from across the country, and it makes me really proud as a native Ohioan to have you guys doing the work you do, and it's just top notch. Yeah, we can definitely dive in. I think the Smart Tire example has been a fun one. This was a NASA spinoff from the research lab in Cleveland, and they recently actually were on Shark Tank, and it was awfully interesting and fun to get them, see our entrepreneurs getting grilled by Mark Cuban, and Kevin Hart, the comedian, was actually one of the guest judges. So pretty interesting. So my confession today is that I'm actually beaming in not from Cleveland or Washington, D.C., but out in LA, in Anaheim, and we're taking our kids to Disneyland, first family vacation in quite a while. And in traveling through, the planes, trains, and automobiles to get here with two screaming kids made me sort of divert my mind elsewhere and start to think, about preparing for this webinar and some of the role of government technologies that they have that are in our lives. So, when we got ready, we warmed up food in a microwave that was initially funded by the Defense Department, microwave technology, and accidental invention by Raytheon, a big defense contractor. We inputted Disneyland into our mapping software. If you look at that, DoD funded GPS research, smart cruise control on our car that helped us get here, initially, developed by DARPA through some of the autonomous driving programs. Smart, when I take photos of my kids next to Mickey in a couple of days, we're going to use technology in the camera cell phones that was initially developed by NASA. Unfortunately, I didn't have access to the CIA mind control, anything there that could help, making an easier trip. But in general, what's been exciting, and kind of the reason FedTech exists is that government is really the lead investor in so many technologies that touch our lives every day and will touch our lives. If you look at it on an annual basis, government spends about 200 billion with a B with small businesses every single year. And so kind of leading into a question for Scott, I guess if you could share a little bit of, just from a strategy perspective, why does DoD care so much about ventures? Why do organizations like Ensign exist? What's the reasoning from a strategic standpoint, and where does rubber hit the road?
Well, there's obviously some hard primary reason why government cares about venture. I think one of the challenges right off the bat is it's really hard to get things in the Defense Department unless there's a company providing it. As much as we talk about grants, and we have fantastic grant programs and the research that we're doing in various locations, at some point in the development process, we need somebody to be caring about the development of the product to the point where they can continue to bring it to market. And so that's oftentimes where we need the vehicle really being the company that can make that next step happen. So along those lines, I think Ben's experienced this quite a bit, and those of you that are thinking about working with the Defense Department. As you look at the Defense Department and a lot of the large pieces of technology that Ben was just citing, like the microwave, eventually you have to get it to a General Electric, or you have to get it to some other group who's going to bring it to market and commercialize it. So as I'm talking with my team, oftentimes it gets to the point in the process where a university team has worked on the particular technology and is transitioning it back and giving it back to a DoD mission partner to, for that solution that they needed. We still have that process of needing a company to take that product forward, because unfortunately there's a reason that we've engaged them in the first place, right? The government in this case, the Defense Department, wasn't able to solve that problem on their own. They needed somebody to come along with new ideas, fresh ideas to bring to the market. And so as you'll see here today, I mean, we have not just myself on this call, but we've got a university person at Washington University in St. Louis. We have somebody at I'm gonna say this to this audience, the University of Michigan. We're gonna be nice to them because they're here today. We have somebody at Georgia Tech who's also on this, obviously Ian from Ohio State, but there's this mass need to engage places like universities because they're sources of talent for us, and bringing that talent to harder projects, whether it's something like material science and like a hypersonics problem, or maybe it's something that's like a computer science problem where we need some help. Oftentimes it's something as easy as just implementing a commercial technology in a new way and designing some new plugin or piece to something that doesn't exist on the market. So I think there's lots of ways, depending on where you are, to plug into that ecosystem as a supplier, but that company part is, I think, a real key to make sure that there's not only a solution that's developed and researched, but can continue to be improved and continues to move forward into the defense market. If you don't have that, it becomes really hard. We don't have an easy 1099 program in the Defense Department to get you on board. So we do need your ability to do things, which you also need some other folks to help you with that process. If you haven't registered for what was the DUNS number, I know that's eventually, I think, going away to other systems. But if you haven't started doing some of that government contracting process, it's a scary experience for a lot of entrepreneurs, but that's the other part of this mechanism too, is that we're talking about working with DoD, that formal process that you have to oftentimes go through with contracting, so that having a venture, having a company is a really key part of being able to do that work together. I feel like I keep talking about that one for a long time, but I want to stop and just see where else, if I'm on track.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. When I wonder, and kind of moving over to Patricia, could you share a little bit? So this has been obviously working with government using programs like SBIR has been an important thrust for Jumpstart. I think what's amazing to see is just if you are working on a highly technical early stage company, government is often the absolutely most logical first investor. So can you share a little bit about what's going on in Ohio and how Jumpstart kind of helps position Ohio ventures to be competitive in this space?
Sure, and I'll narrow it down to Northern Ohio and mention we have a number of partners with University of Akron Research Foundation and Ohio Aerospace Institute who are helping us put some seminars, webinars together to help explain if the SBIR, STTR route is actually something that is good for you and worth being pursued. And there from then on, if you do have some technology with some potential, we'll be looking at what type of partners you need to have, whether it's on the team or commercialization partners, in order to put a compelling proposal together. We tend to have, by the way, we actually have a webinar that's coming on. I can put the link in the chat. It's on March 25th. It's an intro to SBIR and STTR, and the OAI and UR folks are also offering some one-on-one time slots so that you can discuss whether it's the right thing to do. And when I say this is actually important, what you mentioned, Scott, the fact that it needs to be a company, that is super important. And as a company, you need to determine whether pursuing this is actually going to help you de-risk the technology and is going to be something that is helping you to where you want to be. versus a distraction. So we have a lot of companies out there that we call SBIR mills, and they do nothing but develop technology that never gets off the shelves and doesn't get commercialized. And that is not a sustainable model for a business, especially if you're thinking some high-tech venturable model. It's more, one-off type of piece of technology versus something that can be grown into addressing a big market need. We're particularly interested in things that are dual use in nature because there's only so many square inches of aerogels that you're going to be able to slap on a space shuttle versus on insulation material for your jacket. You're right. So being able to look at some of those components is important. We're pretty big in using some of the business model canvas and lean launchpad methodologies as far as doing customer discovery early on, getting people out, making sure that they can talk and understand the pain point, whether the solutions that they have are actually meeting a need in the market. So we have a number of ICOR programs that we have throughout the year where some of the teams can participate. And I think this is really like providing the basics in terms of how you need to be thinking about a business. And then after you do the ICOR sites, and then maybe you grow into a bigger ICOR program and get a bit more funding to continue your customer discovery, then you can think about some additional grants, and that's where the SBIR, STTR really is a very nice way to tie you over, continue to de-risk your business. So if you're successful, you're adding value, but you're not diluting your business. And from that standpoint, being open-ended, the ability to bring on some business partners on the team to help work through some of the commercialization questions and challenges and partnering is something that we cannot stress enough. So if you check us out, you can also take a look at entrepreneurial services program and all the partners that we have in the ecosystem, and everybody is well versed into this.
Great, thank you, thanks, Pat. I'm wondering, and just for folks that are a little newer to this space, maybe if the panelists could just help me kind of do a quick primer on some of these terms. So SBIR, starting there, but maybe also looking at some of the other ways that entrepreneurs can attract government funding, whether it's prize competitions or BAAs or anything else that's of interest. But I'm wondering, maybe Scott, starting with you, could you help me sort of just define SBIR, what's involved, with an entrepreneur being able to identify funding through that, and then also if you want to speak to prize competitions or anything else that's Ensign is doing, just to sort of, for folks that are a little newer to the space here.
Yeah, and I would have put a shameless plug in for you, Ben, on SBIR, because we worked together in, I think it was late 2017, early 2018. On what became the beginnings of the open topic process the Air Force is using today. So you obviously and your team have some great history in that space. And I don't know if you always get credit for that, but I remember those days of when we were meeting and talking about how we can make the SBIR process better for entrepreneurs. So I think you played a great role in that. I just don't know if you ever get the attention for it, but I thank you for it.
Thank you.
So
much appreciated.
SBIR though is small business innovation or research. You've got STTR, tech transfer, where you have the difference between the two is the need for a STTR needs a research component. You need to have like a connection to a university or in some cases a lab to be able to do that work, and a percentage of that work has to be done with that organization. So as you're looking at these two different flavors that exist out there for these types of projects, they're contracts. They're not grants. So they're often, you're given timeline. So in the case of something like the Air Force open topic, for their SBIRs, I believe they're still 3 months in terms of period of performance. So how long you're working on that particular contract. And it's really focused on, let's say, customer discovery. So as part of a phase 1, so an initial contract with them, you're really working on, does your product have a market with a particular defense mission partner somewhere. Hopefully in the Air Force in relevance to the Air Force open topic, but they do obviously cross over into the Navy and others taking a look at those companies going through that process. But SBIR is a little bit different than STTR in the sense, so when you're looking at the amount of funding going in, there's usually a little bit less funding going into STTR. And again, that key connection of academic partnerships. So if you have one in the state of Ohio with, like, as Patricia was talking about, Akron, which is not too far from those of you in Northern Ohio, that's a really great way to engage in this process, because sometimes it's the need for, you know, a university lab or space to do the discussions and maybe the experimentation that you might need to do in those early stages. But it's a really hard thing to unpack. Like, I would love to join Patricia's session to talk more about SBIR and SITR and how, like, it's just so different across the services. But I think that what you're looking at is the Air Force, the Army, the Navy all have SBIR opportunities. It's 3 times a year as sort of the general schedule. However, I know the Army is moving to something that might be more akin to more flexible than just 3 times a year. And so maybe some others on this line might know that better than I do at the moment. But I would say that there are lots of ways to engage, and it's not just the services. You can actually go further down the list to the special operations community has topics that are out available sometimes. I think MDA, which is another group inside of the Defense Department, has topics. So essentially gets into this place where there's another smaller set of topics that exist on a more regular basis as well. But Air Force, Navy, and Army are really the big 3 places to look for. There's also a website you can go to. So if you're looking for more, I think is it DSIP still? There's a portal that you can go to.
Yeah, I was going to point out just SBIR.gov is kind of the big central for kind of information across all of the programs. So Scott, were you going to say something else?
No, there's obviously more to talk about.
Yeah, tons to talk about. Thank you, Scott. And I think what's been really interesting and rewarding to see, so Scott mentioned some of the work, you know, that was done many years ago, and Scott was crucial in this. It was making SBIR kind of return to its roots of purpose, and I'll kind of share what I mean there. So, you know, back when Congress first authorized this, and to give you a sense of the scale, it's about $3 billion a year that is available for tech ventures like yours. And it's non-dilutive funding. There was a sort of move, Patricia mentioned, you know, SBIR mills. These are basically companies that are very good at writing proposals and often, you know, quite good at doing the initial research, but maybe not as good at kind of formulating that research into products that create new jobs. There's kind of was a trend where, you know, those companies were really receiving the lion's share of that $3 billion. Starting back a few years ago, like Scott mentioned, there's been a move to make it much more startup friendly. So instead of having a 20-page proposal, you have pitch submissions, you have slides, you know, much more of a venture experience in working with the Air Force, and now the Army has done some amazing work to just make it more, make SBIR kind of return to its roots of being really for first-time entrepreneurs, for early stage tech ventures that have an interest in this idea of dual use. So check out, SBIR.gov. And I'll ask my team, what we can do is we can put together a list of funding resources that anyone that wants to email us, we can share with you just across government. So great. I guess for Patricia, like, could you talk a little bit about what Jumpstart is doing, especially, you know, in this, to me, the founding of companies at the very early stage is fascinating. If you look at sort of that 0 to 1, what can people who may not have a company yet but want to start a company, how can they engage with Jumpstart to kind of take that very, very first step?
Yeah, we actually have a lot of folks who are contacting us who have an idea and may not have it fully baked with a term sheet or an executive summary ready to raise some funding. We're going to evaluate and assess the potential of the idea, making sure that it's addressing a big market need, evaluating the team, looking what type of gaps there are, being able to, you know, look at the value proposition, more customer validation, what is it going to take to to build the product, system, solution, whatever that might be. We rely heavily on our partners across the ecosystem in Northeast Ohio and Northwest Ohio, because we do have some subject matter experts who can lend a hand and provide a perspective. Also leaning on the mentoring program that we manage, Burton D. Morgan mentoring program, where we can get some rockstar industry players who can provide some insights as far as where, you know, the landmines are, do this, don't do that, go there, don't go there, and whatnot. And this is helping us really evaluate different elements of the business and figure out, you know, if they have potential. In order for them to be eligible for funding, they need to have gotten some traction and whatnot. But we do have some funding sources across the region that are helping support companies to continue product development and continue to de-risk. And of course, the federal funding is a huge element and component to do just that, the de-risking, potentially identifying a market that may not otherwise have been the target market, but something that is meaningful and big enough. So we spend quite a bit of time evaluating all this and provide a roadmap to the entrepreneurs in terms of what it is that they need to do. Teaming is typically something that is going to have to happen in order to bring in the end users, especially as it pertains to some of the validation, like Scott mentioned about, is there a there? It might end up being partnering with a big supply chain or DoD contractor, which might end up actually fast forwarding how quickly you can get on the contract, because they have other vehicles like the mentor protege programs that you might be able to leverage. So the hardest thing is really to get in. I think you don't want to think about those things in increments, like, oh, I'm going to do phase 1, I don't have to worry about phase 2. It's like, how do you make this a long-lasting winning relationship for the long haul? So the minute you're submitting phase 1, you already want to have phase 2 pretty much figured out as far as what you want to accomplish. And that's, of course, assuming that the technical kinks are being worked out and that you're all good as it pertains to the technical aspects. But it's more of the business aspects that you're working on and spending energy on, and proving that you can commercialize will eventually put you into this fast-paced, fast-forward contracting opportunity where you can jump into some BAs or just regular procurement. And I think Scott is the expert to talk about this. I haven't done this in a while.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, great. Yeah, and for anybody that is at this kind of early stage, if you're at the 0 to 1 stage, it can be certainly challenging, right? To just where do you start? And what advice I would give, to all of you that are kind of at that point is literally just get involved in everything that you can. There's programs that Pat mentioned at Jumpstart. Just join and create the opportunity to do things like meet founders, do things like discover problem areas that you can start companies around. Go and work. Some of the programming that Ensign has is, I think, just literally the some of the best out there to just get started in forming a company. And really, regardless of whether you're able to have it become a full-time job for yourself and your colleagues, you learn an immense amount even when that doesn't happen. So yeah, so let's jump in. We have some wonderful questions coming in. Just to, again, encourage anybody that is in the audience, please put the questions into the Q&A function, and we'll moderate them. But I'm gonna start with a question that I think Scott will have lots of thoughts around. So how does a defense mission entrepreneur partner with a university? How do you identify departments that are working on solutions that can be applicable to the DoD? So I think I would interpret this as, for someone in the defense community, in service or not, how would you actually go about sort of starting a relationship with an Ensign to access some of the university network.
So I think that the common complaint from entrepreneurs is sometimes, well, where's the front door for the Defense Department? Where do I need to go first? Like, do I go talk to Ensign? Do I go talk to AFWorks? I think what you'll find is that there are a lot of acronyms out there, a lot of organizations in the Defense Department doing similar but just different work. And we all sort of communicate and work together as a great series of partners trying to encourage this opportunity. So I think if you reach out to any of us, we'll try to find as best we can a way to move you along in the system to the place that you need to go to next. So if you send an email to me, and I can certainly put my email address in the chat if you or pass it along to anybody who needs it. But we also have a transition cell at Ensign where you can send a note to transition@ensign.us, and it'll essentially go to me and a few other people. We'll take a look at it as it's coming in. So as you have needs that are in the space, certainly can try to get you to the right folks for the work that I do. To that point, though, on universities, if you go to the Ensign website, you'll see that there are universities across the United States. I think we're cataloging it right now. We had like 680 universities, I think, that we've worked with in some capacity over the last 5 years at Ensign that have some touch point in our network. So if there's, depending where you are in the United States, there's a really good chance that we have a number of universities close by that we can potentially put you in touch with if you're looking to connect. You don't necessarily have to connect with the university to do this work, but I would just say that if you are looking to pursue that, again, Ian, one of my colleagues that's from the state of Ohio is on the line today. Ian is our UPD in the state of Ohio at Ohio State University. I just talked with him yesterday. So if you're looking to connect, I mean, he's connecting as far north as like Case Western Reserve up in the Cleveland area, down to Cincinnati in the south. So if you are looking to connect, Ian would probably be the first person I would probably point you to, because he's going to have the most up-to-date knowledge on who's doing what in the ecosystem. I think the other thing that to point out is that some universities specialize, right? Like I remember I was a Kent State University grad that had the only NATO center in the United States. I think University of Pittsburgh had like the only EU center in the United States that I was tracking at the time. I think it's diversified since then. But for the most part, there are some great pockets that you can go to. So at Kent State, it was things like liquid crystal displays where they had the technology and the input, and then they banked on that for years as a technology stream. But I think that that's kind of the challenge, right? You end up having to find what is the specialization of the particular school, what's the professor that works in this particular area, and then sort of going from there. So there's usually a little bit of research to make sure that there's the right match between you and principal investigator at a particular school. It's kind of the same way with companies. So I know Patricia put a plug in, I put in the chat as well for things like Mentor Protege. So finding a way to connect with a defense prime. There is a program that essentially pays the defense prime to work with you and to mentor you as part of Mentor Protege. So they receive resources as part of a Mentor Protege agreement that they put in place. And it's a great way to onboard solutions into the Defense Department as a supplier for a company. And so a lot of the big primes take advantage of that as a way to look at other ways of collaborating with new sources of technology. Because at the end of the day, some of these established primes that have been around for a long time are smart. They know that you have technologies they don't have. And it actually increases the viability of their proposals when they show that they're able to quickly get into the space and connect with you as the supplier for a unique capability that the Defense Department is looking to do. So back to Ben's point, I would also say that reaching out and talking to some of those folks, maybe not your top target at that organization, but just having a conversation with like Patel in the state of Ohio, who's obviously been doing a lot of work with DOE Labs, the Defense Department for years. It's a great DoD or aligned organization prime that's in the Columbus Plus ecosystem. So I think there are a number of places. NASA Glenn, I think would certainly be another place to look at in terms of connection. We have a bunch of facilities at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton. So I think there's a number of ways in which you could quickly plug into through a prime or through another entity in the state of Ohio back into the mission set. So I think universities is certainly one of those ways, but I would also echo expanding your outreach to folks that are DoD aligned in that.
Great, absolutely. Thank you, Scott. So just reading through. So again, please type in your questions for the panelists and we'll get to as many as we can. Question from the audience for Patricia. So Jumpstart doesn't fund companies with less than 75K a year in sales. For early stage companies that are, capital intensive, such as medical device, are there other, areas that you'd recommend kind of attracting funding, other funders that or programs that Jumpstart might be able to help with?
We'd have to get back with that person on the specifics of the programming. I don't want to misspeak for the investing arm of the, but just in general, there are several funds similar to some of Jumpstart's funds that are supported partially by the Ohio Third Frontier, and some of them have a different level of threshold, and also, of course, it's a different size of investment. Particularly here, and I believe that now they fund across Ohio, the Innovation Fund. I can look for make sure it's the right link and put it in the chat. Does provide some support for earlier stage companies that haven't gotten the traction yet needed.
Great, yeah, thanks, Pat. Yeah, just again, to put in another plug for government funding for the person that asked that question. NIH, huge SBIR program, challenging, very competitive, but for medical device, companies, very good place to seek funding. There's other programs out there. One thing we haven't talked much about yet are these prize competitions. So the government has something called Prize Authority, where they're able to offer usually relatively small awards to companies or sort of even individuals that are solving certain problems for the government. So if you check out prize.gov, you can see, numbers of there should be dozens and dozens of competitions running on now that are they're very competitive, but they're very easy once you would be selected to actually receive the money. And often that can be, a really good kind of early stage capital for things like medical devices. So thank you for that question. Scott, we got a question just to hear more about the transition cell. Could you share kind of what goes on? Sounds mysterious, sounds awesome, but what goes on behind the scenes? And then any examples of just companies that you can talk about that you're kind of working with to move on from Ensign programs?
Yeah, there's a lot. So we've worked with, it's over 2,000 companies at my time at Ensign. So it's a pretty large list of companies. And keeping up with all the companies that we've worked with, and when they raise a new fund or when they get a new DD contract, is its own full-time job of just keeping on top of the data. So I think I'll provide a sort of a recent example of this. In the transition cell, we've actually got two of my colleagues from the transition cell on here. Chris and Toby are both in the queue somewhere. At least I saw them as attendees. They may have ducked out now that I've mentioned them. But if you send a note to transition@ensign.us, it'll go to Chris, Toby, another guy named John Rivnak, who is, I think, down in Texas at the moment at South by Southwest. But we've specialized inside the transition cell of those of us back to, I think, Ben, you were talking about, prize authority. There's a lot of different vehicles, right, that the Defense Department has. One of them you might have heard of is Other Transactions Authority, or OTs, that exists as part of this sort of awesome DAU contracting cone, which I put in the chat, of all the sort of vehicles and authorities that we have for doing work together. And Chris is a specialist in OTs and a number of other vehicles that we've been working on. So in the transition cell, we essentially specialize in terms of who knows how to do certain types of tasks, who knows how to do this, these types of contracts. John Rivnak worked in VC in Columbus and is now helping us with private capital at Ensign as well. So I guess he'd be Patricia's counterpoint for us at Ensign. John has got a wealth of experience on the venture side, and we're looking at how we can make that process easier for those looking to raise funds and do work in this sort of dual use space. So the market where you have both a commercial and, let's say, a government opportunity for your business. So, and then Toby is sort of like the jack of all trades. Like he does a little bit of everything at Ensign. He's oftentimes the one interfacing with us and some of the businesses to ask them sort of what are their needs relative to the space as we move them through the system. So the transition still in many ways is trying to fill those gaps between programs and conversations to make sure that businesses are continuing to find another pathway to get further along the lines in their journey. So sometimes it's a warm introduction to another mission partner. Sometimes it's, hey, there's a new cyber sitter opportunity that's now popped up, or a webinar talking about like a facilities clearance that somebody might be interested in. So there's a lot of things that you would have to do as a business in this space. And so oftentimes that knowledge, we needed to concentrate it a little bit more with some specialized skills. And so I just got a great team on the transition cell supporting that. I sadly am also, not only because I'm the director, I also throw in where I can. And so right now I'm working on larger FAR contracts so that I can create more predictable, larger pathways to doing this work, but working with larger defense primes to enable that space. So I think over time we'll have a diverse process that we can provide in terms of smaller contracts, things like SBIRs that we were talking about earlier eventually can turn into phase 3 SBIRs, which have a lot of advantages. So there are pathways in each one of these processes. So I think we're really like kind of guides in that process is the best way to describe us. Of we have some experience doing this work. We love to help out and pitch in where we can. It just depends on where you are and where you might be stuck in the process.
You guys are kind of cruise directors, consigliaries. Any we could pick our Scott. Can you mention? I was fascinated to read. You sent me the article about Slingshot Aerospace. Any stories there? Pretty neat example. It sounds like of a company leveraging DoD to then go and raise a very large private round.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. It touches on all of our portfolios. We've actually been geeking out. I've been geeking about it internally for a couple of days now. But so Slingshot Aerospace is a company. It's been around for a while, and we actually worked with them in their early days. I remember meeting the founder. I think it was like 2017 or 2018 of the company, and then they eventually participated in one of our pitch competitions with the Joint AI Center in New York City. So we ran an event, one of our programs, we call it Starts. And they participated, it helped them quite a bit. And then from there, they've now added, I think, somewhere between $6.5 and $7.5 million in government contracts. But now it's come full circle to the point where one of our regional directors, Tony, who's not on the call with us today, or at least I don't think, is our Great Lakes regional director. He's out of Chicago. So one of his University of Chicago teams in hacking for defense became a company. And the company was acquired now by Slingshot Aerospace, which created another vertical inside of that organization. And they raised funds based on that. I think it's a space situational awareness technology. So we've actually now somehow between our programs have both helped a company in terms of an early entry opportunity, which I think is a great company, and have now through hacking for defense, one of our other programs helped it with another supply for a product line. Not intended, like in terms of we didn't start out and say, hey, how do we encourage these folks to all work together? But I think it's a great story to show the power of providing a network as we do at Ensign, providing skill sets, great entrepreneurs, providing great programming. And then just sometimes it works really well, right? Like there's this great connection between a company and essentially acquiring talent, people, that these 3 individuals from the University of Chicago that came in for a product line. I think it was a good story.
Wonderful story, yeah. And I think what's also to me compelling is they're especially in Silicon Valley, there's kind of this occasional idea that private capital doesn't want to fund companies that have connectivity to the government, which I think is based on some kind of faulty assumptions. And then this type of example shows just the ability for companies that have government lineage to really go in and do big raises. So wonderful stuff there. I guess a couple questions around kind of intellectual property and just how would you recommend startups engage in any of the programs that we're discussing while protecting their IP? Pat, maybe over to you. Any thoughts around this? How companies can just feel secure in terms of interacting with Jumpstart around their IP?
So typically we do not sign NDAs. We actually ask folks that they start engaging with us with some information that can be shared publicly. Not that we would walk around and scream on the rooftops, but just general plain information. We're also very interested in the ability for someone to put a pitch together that doesn't require somebody to have a PhD to understand what it's about. You actually have to think about the audience as a fifth grader. And it's hard, especially when some of those researchers have such cool, super complicated technology, and they're trying to distill down to some very compelling argument. But at the end of the day, from an investing standpoint and to look at market potential, we're looking at the best way to articulate a simple value proposition. And if it does have some, if there is interest and we need to dig deeper and look at the competitive landscape and do some IP search to see what else is out there, freedom to operate and whatnot, then we can, dig into the fine print of the claims. But the initial engagement does not require it doesn't have to be that complicated.
That's good. Yes, simple is always good. Scott, any advice on this, just in terms of for entrepreneurs, that would work with Ensign in some of the program or another, that just how to feel about, the IP or any trade secrets?
Yeah, I would just echo that. There's so many new technologies that you're working on. I have no clue sometimes what you're talking about. Like, I feel like just a handful of months ago, somebody introduced me to what Web3 is. Still don't really get why that's new and compelling, other than like it's growing in interest. We're just not ready for it sometimes. So I would just say that something that you might come in and say is like super valuable to you as part of your value proposition, we might just not get it. So just think about that. And I don't know if that's making us as a fifth grader or what grade level that would be, but like there's a challenge sometimes in conveying your value proposition to us. And I think that's oftentimes where you're trying to figure out, like, do I disclose that I have some unique intellectual property that nobody else has, versus, sort of trying to just explain in few words, like why your system is going to improve our lives and be better, as opposed to another system that might be on the market, and making sure that that's as compelling as possible. Because I will tell you that sometimes you would think that the best solution will always win. We don't necessarily know what the best solution is sometimes because of the language that's used, because it reads like, you have to have a PhD in physics to understand sometimes what these proposals actually say. And so I just think that conveying as best you can what your product is, sometimes in the simple way, at least for the first go around, is best. And then when you need to disclose intellectual property at some point in the future, just be careful on that. I'm obviously, I would just say, as a government person, like, somebody gives me proprietary information, it's protected in the sense that I'm not going to go out and start sharing it with a bunch of other folks. But just, you always want to be careful in terms of who you're sharing your secret sauce with, if you have any. I would say that there's a great thing about SBIR are things like data rights and other components as part of the discussion. So you should focus on that, I think, a little bit when you're applying to some of these processes, to think about what types of opportunities it might provide you. But there's always going to be in the back of my mind as a government person, thinking about government purpose rights relative to the utilization of a piece of software or kit. So there's always going to be some tension in the system, and I don't really have a great way of deciding it because I'm not a lawyer. So at the end of the day, I'm going to ask somebody else, what does this mean? Like, can we do this? Yes or no? Is this something that we can disclose, not disclose? I think that that's a big challenge for us in government. So we need your help sometimes, like helping us think through what's truly unique and different about something that you offer.
Yep. I always find it, it's in FedTech has the benefit of getting to interact with hundreds and hundreds of ventures every single year through our programs, and we haven't seen a lot of examples of if any, of IP theft or those types of concerns. So it's often just better to be I think be open, and while not maybe showing your blueprints, there's kind of a line there. But well, just to so we're a couple of minutes till the end here, and thank you all for the wonderful questions and the discussion. I'm wondering if just both Pat and Scott could offer, sort of a forward-looking vision. If you look at Ohio, and then just even the greater entrepreneurial community, within in 15 years from now, what does that look like? Or at least, what are a couple of things you'd like to see in the future? Ohio 2035 kind of vision.
Are we talking about sports or we're talking about technology?
It could be either. It could be sports. We could hopefully have a couple Super Bowls.
I'm culturally challenged when it comes to this, so I'll just keep with visioning of entrepreneurship and technology. Well, I think Ohio in general last year has had a smashing record year in terms of investment for tech companies by VCs, and we reached the $2 billion across the state of Ohio, which is absolutely phenomenal. And when you see all the conditions are ripe for that state and the Midwest in general to really, capture some opportunities and become like the Silicon Heartland. I mean, you've heard about Intel coming near Columbus and whatnot, but the momentum had already started a while back, and it's really catching up speed right now to the extent that you can really start seeing some of the benefits. When Drive Capital set up shop in Columbus and had a tremendous effect, the commitment of the state with Ohio Third Frontier and some of the local regional entrepreneur service provider providing tech assistance to some of the startups that have potential. The sky is the limit in terms of what the region can do and achieve, and proximity of resources, great. I hate to talk about affordable cost of living because it's a blessing and a curse. Like, why is it that it's so affordable? But maybe we don't want to shout it everywhere so that it stays this way. It's actually not true. We're going up. The only way is up, and I think that there's going to be some critical, exciting things that are coming out of Ohio. And when you look at Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland, I think, and Toledo, I think that there are lots of neat things that are going to happen, taking advantage of all the assets we have here. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. Scott, any predictions, forward looking? You used to be in this business of predicting the future. And then please, offer a commentary on Browns as well. Well, we got you.
Yeah. I would love to see a 10x. So I think what we did, $1 billion in investment in 2021 in the state of Ohio for startups, something along those lines. So let's say we get to 10 billion too. Let's say that we get to somewhere between 10 plus in that space in 2035. I think that there's a need for more growth stage ventures and CEOs with experience in growth stage. I think that it's the same challenge that you see in some other states where they can get to a certain point in terms of fundraising, and then they don't necessarily have the right model in place to move along and continue to grow. And so we probably need to, it's really a talent thing for the state of Ohio, where we need to bring in more folks with experience or get them out to places, get them into those locations where they can have that experience and then bring it back to the state. So I'd love to see more of that. And I think the last thing, this is like my dream, but I'm still working on it. So I'll probably get there before 2035, which is to have a DoD focused spot in the state of Ohio, where we can have a deeper engagement with the Defense Department. We're doing that right now in Seattle with a thing we call the Mission Acceleration Center, the MAC, out of Seattle. And I think that a concept like that, akin to like a capital factory out of Austin, Texas, would be great for the state of Ohio, because you do have a great solid footprint in Dayton, in the Dayton, Ohio, in terms of military connection to the Air Force, but it doesn't necessarily connect as well to those of you that are startups in the state. And so I would love to find a better way to connect those end users that could provide that insight onto the DoD mission with those of you that have supplies that can provide us with some help in terms of building new capabilities. So I'd love to see that be a focal point somewhere in the state, but I think that's certainly part of my 2035 vision.
Wonderful. Wonderful visions from both of you. Thank you. Well, we are just over time, so we'll leave it here, but I want to thank all the participants for being on. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you to Patricia and Scott for participating in this and offering wonderful insights. And yeah, please check out some of the resources that were put into the chat. Feel free to contact anyone on the FedTech team if you want to learn more about our programs or about any of the funding opportunities that were discussed here today. Check out Ensign's website as soon as you can. There's just immensely positive programming that you can participate in. Check out Jumpstart's website. And yeah, everybody have a great day. Thank you so much for your time and energy here.